Okay, look, we might get started. We're a minute or so over time, and if I can start today, firstly by acknowledging that I meet today. I sit today on the land of the Wathaurong people of the Kulin Nation. I thank them for their custodian of this country. I welcome anyone from the Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander community that we have online today, and I certainly thank and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. As I said, my name is Michael Poulton. I'm the CEO for Committee for Ballarat, and it's with a great deal of pleasure that I have the chance today to speak to the Connect, Evolve, Recover group for Commerce Ballarat. So once again, welcome to all those who are online. I'm going to share a screen. I'd much rather you see my presentation than see my face. So I'll share the screen, and hopefully we will have the information available to you all. Here we go. That's a little bit interesting. I haven't seen that pop up before. Let's try that again. Okay, so I hope you're now seeing the slide that I'm looking at. I'm assuming that's the case. And there's a picture there of the Gold Coast Football Club, the Gold Coast Suns. My background is I've been the CEO of the Committee for Ballarat for just on 12 months now. And prior to that, I've had a lifetime experience working in elite sport, which involved a fair period of time teaching at the University of Ballarat in elite sport, in sport coaching, sport development. And then in 2006, I joined Athletics Australia, did 6 years with Athletics Australia as the National Coaching Director, and oversaw the coaching component of both the Beijing and London Olympics. And then in 2012, post-London, I joined the big bad world of football. And whilst I wasn't a footballer and had no background in AFL, other than being a bit of a supporter, I spent 6 years working in the AFL. 4 years of that in football operations in a role called competition stakeholder manager, and the final 2 years really as a consultant working in clubs around performance development and particularly in coaching development. So my forte has really been in around how you bring the best out of people. And one of the reasons that I wanted to share my thoughts and experiences with you today is that I think that the lessons from high performance sport are very applicable to those lessons across business, particularly now at this time of great adaptation and challenge through COVID-19. So hopefully I will get through today a few thoughts and they'll resonate with you as business leaders or business people, and that there might be some learnings there for us to take on board. There is a Q&A function that's enabled down at the bottom of your screen. I'm aware of those Q&As, so if you've got any questions that you'd like to raise, please do so, and I'll do my best either to answer them as we go or perhaps towards the end where there's a little bit of time left. So look, let's get into it. But as I said, I spent quite a bit of time with the Gold Coast Suns and with also Geelong Football Club through the final 2 years of my time, through 2018 and 2019. And it was interesting working with two clubs at opposite ends of the ladder. Geelong at that stage, 2018, they were flying and were one of the top clubs in the league, and then clearly Gold Coast were at the bottom of the ladder. And it was a really interesting experience for me to have some involvement in both those clubs, one at a very much a rebuild phase and one of the phase that was trying to win a premiership. The 4 years prior to that, I'd been involved in the league at league headquarters in a fairly senior role there, where I was working essentially with 18 clubs, particularly with high performance managers. So the guys, and they are guys, the guys who run the high performance program, the physical preparation part of the program, GMs of football and senior coaches. So it was a really diverse group of people to be working with, and this notion of high performance thinking, which I'd always been a part of, and leadership development particularly, really came to the fore. First slide I really wanted to share was this one, and I love it from the TAC ad. As coaches, and I use this slide a lot when I work with coaches, but as coaches and as leaders, we have incredible capacity to influence, and it is our own actions that really do model behaviours of others. So when we look at that image, not surprising. Little Johnny in the back, he's going to grow up one day as a pretty angry driver, because that's the model that he has seen throughout his entire life. So I think that's a really important image for us to keep in mind as we work through some of these things today about this notion, and it is a word which I'll talk to you about, weeness. So we'll move to that. But look, don't know if we've got any Richmond supporters online today, but if we do, you'll be very familiar with this particular image. It's not Richmond's most recent premiership, but it was certainly potentially their most significant in 2017. You'll note that they're wearing a jumper that was not their normal jumper at that point in time. And I use this slide because it tells a story around what success looks like. And when I ask that question, what does success look like in your business? Most people are able to come up with highly measurable notions. It's about bottom lines. It's about profit margins. It's about measurable metrics that they can put numbers to. In Richmond's case, or in AFL football's case, it's a premiership. And I guess the thing there that starts to challenge me a little bit is to say, well, that means that in the AFL environment, that one team is successful, therefore 17 teams are not successful every year. Clearly, we have one listener online who's a Richmond supporter, because I've just got the big yellow and black call out. So thank you for that, Rebecca. So this notion of what a success looks like in high performance sport has really interested me over a long, long period of time. And I find now, when I'm working in the role that I am as the committee for Ballarat, working predominantly with business, that it's the same question. What does success look like? What does success in your business look like? And for Richmond, they went through literally a transformation. And the 2017 premiership, and why it is so significant, is because the club from the end of 2016 to the start of 2017 addressed a whole range of issues that went to their team culture, that went to club culture, that started to describe this notion of success that was not necessarily about winning a premiership. Because the sense was, well, if we don't win a premiership, we therefore fail. And what does that do for our well-being, for our connectedness, for our understanding of self in this highly competitive and incredibly competitive competition? So a lot of work was done both with the coaching group, with the club. It was across the board that this notion of the 4 C's, and it's not unique to Richmond, but it's certainly something that is apparent in high performance sport, is that competence, confidence, character, and connection become crucial if we're interested in what success really looks like. Competence, that's winning a premiership. You're the most competent team if you win the premiership. It's our ability to perform. And what I would hate to think that people go away with today is this sense of this bloke on the webinar is saying that performance is not important. It absolutely is important. Financial performance is crucial. Our ability to meet our bottom lines are important. Our ability to meet budgets are important. Competence goes to performance. But in addition to competence, in addition to performance, we have to consider the more human elements of what performance is about. The individual and collective confidence of your staff or your group or your playing group. The character that your organisation builds in those individuals and the collective. And the connection that's possible when we start building human character and building human confidence. And there's a term that we use in high performance coaching that's called driven benevolence. And when some studies was done a couple of years ago around the very best coaches in the world, what they determined world serial winning coaches. When you are a serial winning coach, you have produced performances over a long period of time across a whole range of domains with a whole range of different groups of athletes. Arguably, Damien Hardwick had a pretty good group of athletes when they won the premiership in 2017. Many coaches have said you can be a pretty good coach if you've got a good bunch of athletes. But the serial winning coaches talk about a whole range of other issues. And one of the things that really starts to come into their language is this notion of driven benevolence. driven for absolute performance, laser focused, singular focused, performance focused, but never at the expense of the individual. So driven benevolence relates to this notion of being laser focused in your desires, in your performance goals. And benevolence relates to never being at the expense of the individual. So care comes into this incredibly greatly. So if we start to look at what does success look like in business, what does success look like in high performance sport, we're failing. We're only seeing part of the answer if we define our metrics on performance basis only, that we are dealing by and large with people in our organisations, and people can be driven by confidence, by character, and by connection. So keep those in mind as we go along. I just want to present a couple of leadership models to you, and now I'm going to use some examples out of sport, and I would challenge you as we go along just to think about how this relates to you and your business, or the leader that you are, or indeed the leaders that lead you. And the leadership model I'm going to relate to here is one that we know well. And the reason I use Joel Selwood is that he is seen as being a great captain. He's a great leader. He leads from the front. This notion of leadership from the front is one that it puts a very square focus on the individual. This is about Joel. This is about his personal identity. It is he being the leader. The team looks for Joel at critical times in a game. Where do you go to? Joel will show us the way. We see it in the media. We see it in a whole range of commentary that leaders step up at really difficult times. And in football, there's this saying that, what a great man. And it is gendered because it is only ever termed what a great man. I've never heard in my time in football, what a great woman. So it is a gendered comment. But the great man theory of leadership says that the individual will find their way. The individual will lead us out. And if we think back through history, we see that this is true. The individual being responsible for leading a group through. Churchill leading his country at a time of great need in crisis. So this focus is on the individual. It's on a personal identity. And it's on this notion of everything evolves upwards towards that particular leader, what I call the great man theory. There's an alternative, and it's a leadership model that talks around teams. It's a leadership model that talks around people. And in the little clip on the side there, some of you might remember from the Commonwealth Games from a couple of years ago now, seems like a long time ago. The end of the 10,000 metres, the girl reaching out with her hand, number 9, is Eloise Wellings. I'm sorry, Poppet was her maiden name. She won the gold medal, and the two behind her were both in the top 5. The girl on the inside, the dark-coloured skin girl, number 13, was last. But not only was she last by a good couple of minutes. Now, typically what happens in a race in track and field is the winner grabs the flag and they do the lap of honour, regardless of what else is happening in and around the ground. On this occasion, the 3 Australian girls waited for the Ghanaian athlete to finish the race before they took off on their lap of honour. And in doing so, showed a great sign or great hand of friendship to say, well done for completing what was a pretty arduous race. Well and truly after the final lap, the final bell of every other athlete. So this notion of leading from within, a leaderful team, it's a very different notion from the great man theory. It's about team. It's about a psychology of a group. It's about a shared identity. It's about horizontal leadership. We are all equal. It's we-ness, W-E-N-E-S, we-ness, we together. And this notion of a social construct is really interesting, because if you think about teams, it's obvious. It makes so much sense that those teams should be constructed around the people within it. It's a shared identity. What is it we have in common? We are working towards a similar goal. It's the psychology of the group. But so often in our leadership environment, so often in our sporting teams, and I suspect so often in business, is that we default back to this, we need a leader to show us the way. at the times when it's most critical, who is going to step up and show us the way? They're telling us this is what we've got to do. And that becomes the default position. So this notion of we-ness, whilst it's a nice, admirable position, we don't often see it modelled as well as we might. I'm going to show a couple of images now, which I think in some ways separates the difference. You might remember this. It goes back some time now. George W. Bush, he was the president before the current one and before that one. So it's going back a couple of presidents now. Mission accomplished was a very well orchestrated campaign that said America had done the job in the Middle East. George Bush flew onto the aircraft carrier, the Eisenhower, dressed like a soldier, dressed like an airman, dressed like one of those, and stood in front of, and it was in front of, a whole range of military personnel with the sign above, mission accomplished. It's a sign of great strength. It's the sign of we defeated the enemy. It's a sign of we won and they lost. And this notion of how I crafted myself as a president giving that message, I'm going to be in naval fatigues here. I'm going to be seen to be one of them. It's a very strong portrayal of this is the power over which our adversary we have asserted. So it's the leadership in this great man theory. The great man has led us through, and all those behind clapping and cheering accordingly. The next photo is a different period of time and a different US president, and it's Barack Obama in the middle. And it was the 50th anniversary of the Selma Bridge March, which was a civil rights march, which ended in tragedy for so many Black Americans. This particular moment, Obama is seen joining hands with a great throng of people. His sleeves are rolled up, he's in his work mode, and it's a shared identity. It's a shared identity because together we are going to mark this measure. We're going to mark this occasion. It's not Obama standing on his own. It's not Obama on the pedestal. It's not Obama out there saying the great man has led you here. It is a united voice. So two very different points of time, two very different historical moments, but two moments which go very directly to the leadership of those involved. More about that in a minute. So if we think about we-ness, what's the alternative? It's I-ness. It's we versus I language. I can talk about we will get our way through this. We will find our way through these difficult times. We will implement policy. We will run the business. Or I can talk about I will lead you out of the difficulties. I will manage this business. I will portray which way we'll go forward. My government will do. There is very different language when we start talking we versus I. The we, it's together, it's shared. The I is follow me. So what does it look like? In we-ness, in the theory of we-ness and the leadership theory of we-ness, first and foremost, it's about enabling others. It's about enabling others to be the best version of themselves. It's shared identity. It's socially constructed. Therefore, it is about the group. It's built by the group. It's empowering. It gives people the opportunity to find themselves. It gives people the opportunity to be the one who can get some things done, are contributing to a social context. And it absolutely has at its core care and benevolence. If we layer that with I-ness, if we layer that with the great man theory, it's about compliance, doing as you're told. It's individually focused. This is now on me. What have I got to do? It's personally constructed. The narrative sits around my responsibility. It's different to empowering. It's actually controlling. We are controlling the behaviours of others. And in the I language, we tend to be focused on the outputs of a person beyond what they actually have to offer. So the difference between care and benevolence and outputs is in a caring environment. I care about you as well as your outputs. When we take off the care, I just care about the outputs. And the two things can be incredibly different. Just want to show a 60-second video. It's from a movie that many of you will have seen. It's called Sully, and it tells the story of a plane, 2009 now. It's, again, seems some time ago, that ditched in the Hudson River. It was attacked. It was attacked by what's called a bird strike. Not long after takeoff out of New York Airport, birds got into both engines, an incredibly unique and rare occurrence, and disabled the plane. And the captain was able to land the plane safely on the Hudson River in the middle of January, when the Hudson River is by and large frozen, or certainly extremely cold. And every one of the 155 people aboard that aeroplane survived. So let's look at the video.
I'd like to add something on a personal note. I can say with absolute confidence that after speaking with the rest of the flight crew, with bird experts, aviation engineers, after running through every scenario, after interviewing each player, there is still an X in this result. And it's you, Captain Sullenberger. Remove you from the equation and the math just fails.
I disagree. It wasn't just me, it was all of us. It was Jeff and Donna and Sheila and Doreen and all of the passengers, the rescue workers, the air traffic control, the ferry boat crews and the scuba cops. We all did it. We survived.
First Officer Skiles, is there anything you'd like to add? Anything you would have done differently if you had to do it again?
Yes, I would have done it in July.
I'd like to add something on a personal.
Again, it's a little bit difficult when you're talking to a green dot on your screen to see how people react to that, but a little bit of humour at the end. The message here is about the lady running the inquiry was prosecuting the case that there was an X factor, and the X factor was the captain. Remove that X factor, remove the captain from that, and the equation doesn't add up. So the inference there is that without the captain, 155 people would have died. And the response is an interesting one. You cannot take the captain out of the equation, but the captain on their own does not equal the end result. And I think that's what the critical thing of we-ness is about. It is about collective thinking. It is about a social construct. It is about enabling others to be the best version of themselves. And those who've seen that movie will know that once the plane went down, an awful lot of work was done by an awful lot of people to ensure that 155 people survived. The captain was the last one off the plane, but he certainly wasn't removed from the rest of the effort. And it certainly didn't mean that he was the one coordinating the entire effort. So the sum of the parts are greater. It is the collective and collaborative effort. It is the social construct. It is the opportunity for groups to work out how to do things together that can produce outstanding results. For those who've come on late, again, just to remind anybody that please feel welcome to use the Q&A function down the bottom if you have any questions or comments you'd like to ask, and we'll deal with them as we go through. So let's pull this idea of we-ness apart. What does it really mean? How do you enable this mantra of the social construct? And there's a number of things to it, but I'm just going to pick on a few today. And the first one is that of humility. And again, I'll use some examples through sport that perhaps I hope might tell these stories pretty well for you. I doubt there's anybody listening today, or I doubt there's anybody in Australia who knows the feats of Ash Barty who wouldn't say that she's an incredibly humble athlete. She's the world #1. So anybody who tells you that to be the best in the world, humility is just fluff and bubble, Ash Barty is case in point. Fluff and bubble, if you like, humility and performance can go hand in glove. They are not diametrically opposed. In fact, I would argue they are intrinsically linked. So what is it about humility in a performance sense? The first thing is that ego is the enemy of performance. When we let our ego get in the way of our judgment, then performance is compromised. And we see that time and time and time again. Ego drives individuals to do things that are juxtaposed, that are contrary in many ways to the group effort. So ego is the enemy of humility. Ego is the enemy of a social construct because it puts the individual above others, the great man theory. Humility also gives us the capacity to be aware of ourself and the impact we have on others. And those two comments need to be read in conjunction with each other. It's impact, aware of myself. So how am I seeing myself and how do I see the impact I have on others? They are two slightly different things, because I might see myself as being incredibly benevolent. I might see myself as being a caring person. I might see myself as being very interested in the individual beyond their outputs, but it's not the impact I have on others. And the humble person knows both. The humble person knows and reads and is aware of the impact they have on others. And that wonderful quality, and it goes back to the story of Richmond in 2017, the wonderful quality of vulnerability, that I might just be wrong. And in all my dealings with coaches at the elite level over 20 odd years, it's the area that elite coaches often struggle with the greatest. There is this sense of, I've got to know, I'm paid to know the answer. Athletes expect me to know the answer. And if we think of ourselves in the work environments we're in, how often do we see that in terms of our managers and our leaders, that the leader feels like they just need to have all the answers. I can't be seen to being wrong. I can't be seen to not knowing. Humility says it's okay to be wrong. And if we're interested in we-ness, if we're interested in the notion of the social construct of groups, then vulnerability is a positive. It is okay to be wrong. It's okay not to know. It's okay to feel shame. It's okay to feel sad. Vulnerability is an incredibly important quality in the humanness of leadership. The second one I'm going to come to is perspective. And this is a clip, again, from a football example. And it's a grand final. And guess what? Collingwood lost. Sorry to all those Collingwood supporters in the crowd. And this is one of those visions that might ring true for you. The end of the game, in a very close game, West Coast Eagles knocked over Collingwood. I forget the margin, but it was a very small margin. It was down to the very last kick almost in the game. Jordan De Goey on the ground, devastated. At the end of the ground, we've just lost the grand final. My whole world has fallen apart. Travis Varco is the player picking Jordan up. And if you know the story of this, about a week before the grand final, Travis Varco's sister died. Pretty tough to deal with when you're preparing for a grand final, is to deal with the death of your sister. But Varco would go on to say that the death of his sister gave him an unbelievable appreciation of how lucky he was to play a game called AFL footy. So when Jordan De Goey's life fell apart in the worst possible day of his life, losing a grand final, Travis Varco is thinking how lucky we are to do what we are. So this notion of perspective is an unbelievably powerful one. The capacity to see things as they are, not as we are. Jordan De Goey, I'm devastated. We've just lost the grand final. I probably could have won the grand final. How good would life be if I just won the grand final? But I haven't. We haven't. But in essence, we're playing a game. We got to the grand final. We came within a whisker of it. How good is it that we're able to get to this point in time? And the rest of the world, yes, disappointed if you're a Collingwood supporter, but the reality is this is a game of football. Perspective gives us this capacity to acknowledge the needs of others. Well done, West Coast Eagles. And there's a great story of one of the Apple technicians a number of years ago, jumping into a cab one day in New York. And the cab driver said to him, "Where have you been? What you been doing, mate?" And he'd just been along to a launch of the iPad at that time. And the cab driver said, "Oh, mate, we've got this fantastic thing that's coming out via Google." He said, "It's going to beat Apple hands down. You know, it's an HP product. It's going to be the best thing there is." And the Apple man's response was, "Well done, Google." This capacity for win-win, this capacity to say, you know what, there is not just one winner, that we can acknowledge the success of others. Acknowledging others is a critical element in this notion of perspective. It allows us to savor and celebrate what we have. And how important is that in business? The little wins, being able to get on top of the little wins. And it's about the capacity to reflect on what was, what has been, what we could do. Which leads us to my next one, which is around continuous performance. And the reason I use these two blokes there, and again, they're males, they're amazing sports stars in their own right, that continuous improvement is an infinite game. You never achieve mastery. You never achieve total competence. You never achieve excellence. It's an infinite game because the rules do change. And for last year's premiers in the AFL, the rules will change because everyone now is hunting them. Richmond this year is a very different team to Richmond last year. The rules change. There is no end. And this notion of number one is only really ever a passing moment. So for Nadal and Federer, what drives them? They're driven intrinsically to keep getting better. If they were driven by money, if they were driven by number one status, if they were driven by winning Grand Slams, they would have given away long ago. But the drive is for continuous improvement, knowing that you're never, ever gonna quite get there. The infinite game of performance never ends because the game keeps changing. And I think that's a wonderful notion that we think about in terms of saying, where I'm at right now, on reflection, I can get better. No matter how good I am, I can get better. What are the areas that I can improve on? What are the areas that I really take for granted? Where are the single pieces that I can start to improve on? So no matter how good my bottom line looks, where are the areas of improvement I can get to? To enable that, 3 words sit very, very clearly in the mindset of those who look for continuous improvement. And it's open, it's curious, and it's humble. So as individuals in this notion of we-ness, we're open to alternatives. We're curious about what is possible. And we're humble enough to know that we might not have it right. So if we are interested genuinely in continuous improvement and growth, this capacity to be open is enormously beneficial. But I can be open to ideas without really exploring them, hence curiosity. The capacity for us to ask questions, to challenge, to seek diving a bit deeper, to pulling away the layers, to look a little bit closer. This constant challenge around the status quo is a wonderful element of what makes up continuous improvement. And if we're curious people, we're going to continue to ask great questions and listen to what those answers are. And the last one in humility, and I've said it already, is this capacity to say, it's okay to be wrong, or I might not know. So if we're serious about continuous improvement, open, curious, and humble are at the basis of it, because it is an infinite game. It never ends, and the rules constantly change. Share this photo with you and this statement that goes along with it. It's from Jacinta Ardern, and it was around the time of the Christchurch massacre. You'll notice she's wearing a hijab. You'll notice she's wearing the traditional dress of those who were most affected by that terrible tragedy. And the quote that's so crucial here is that how Jacinta Ardern was able to deal with, or has dealt with, this notion of compassion. One of the criticisms I've faced over the years is I'm not aggressive enough or assertive enough, or maybe somehow because I'm empathetic, it means I'm weak. I totally rebel against that. I love that statement. I totally rebel against that statement. I refuse to believe that you cannot be both compassionate and strong. And I think that's where the criticism of this notion of we-ness comes, is that it's seen as being a little fluffy. It's seen as being standing around in a circle singing Kumbaya together. It's seen that you cannot be compassionate and strong at the same time. And that image is reinforced by the great men of this world, by the patriarchy that we have in this world. The George Bushes standing on the Eisenhower deck with mission accomplished behind him. It's the Vladimir Putin being seen with his shirt off and rifle in his hand. It's this sense that strength is all important. And what perhaps the world needs is this notion that maybe there's a different type of leadership, that compassion, empathy, understanding, listening does not mean you cannot be strong, but it's actually what leads to quite creative problem solving. So getting to the end, the research is clear that our future is going to be different, and it requires a different set of leadership skills. The challenges we'll face post-COVID, the challenges we face right now, require a different style of leadership. And it's different from the command and control style of leadership that we tend to associate with, the great man theory, those who will lead us out of crisis. So what is it that we're looking for, this style of leadership in this post-COVID world, in a world that is volatile, in a world that is uncertain, in a world that is ambiguous? The research is clear that we-ness can enhance enjoyment. We-ness can enhance our creativity. We-ness can enhance our capacity to solve problems. We-ness can enhance our well-being. And perhaps for those who are focused on performance, we also know that we-ness improves performance. The Richmond Football Club of 2017 won a premiership because there were 45 players and probably 100 odd staff, 100,000 supporters who together were trying to achieve a performance. The Richmond Football Club of 2017 would not have won that premiership if they were reliant on the 6 to 8 stars, the great men of the game. This notion of we-ness enhances performance. I would argue even more importantly, it enhances our enjoyment in the things we do. I enjoy coming to work because I think my staff are empowered to do their job. I enjoy coming to work because I know that we think creatively about particular problems. And if I enjoy coming to work, if I'm being empowered in my work, if I'm solving complex issues, my well-being is being improved. And we need to find a way in leading that is underpinned by driven benevolence, that we are laser focused on the outcomes we're seeking to achieve, but it's never at the expense of our people. And for now, that's as much as I've got to offer. I like this last slide because you've got to wonder why it is that you've got someone on a bike riding up a hill with a load of logs behind them. And if anyone would like to answer that question, it'd be great to hear from you. I'm not too sure, but I do know that many things are possible when we understand why. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them. I'm going to take a sip of water because I've spoken too long. So I hope that's been informative for people. I am unsure about the response. It's always difficult, as I said, when you're speaking to a little green dot. But for me, my career has been based by and large around working within elite sport. But I see the parallels of high performance thinking that delivers Olympic Games outcomes, that delivers world championships, that deliver premierships, as being something that is directly transferable in the world that I now work in and the businesses that you people are now heavily involved with. I do have one question, so thank you for that. And it's, Michael, what would your message be to our present political leaders in relation to this concept? Great question, and thank you, Elizabeth, for it. Next time we hear a politician talking on your television screens, count the number of times they say I or my government will, I did. It's language that reinforces the patriarchal view of our society. And our society has changed. It changed about 3 months ago, 4 months ago. It will continue to change. It's always been changing. And yet our leadership style has not evolved accordingly. Because as we're talking today, this notion of we-ness is not something necessarily that gets great traction. So my message to our present politicians is, imagine what is possible when you harness the collective capacity of those incredible people that you have available to you in your teams. Imagine what is possible, the creativity that can be opened up, the enabling that is possible when you embrace the diversity of thought and thinking that you have. And to our present political leaders, that capacity to be open, curious, and humble is absolutely the answer to our leadership style that we need in a volatile, ambiguous, and uncertain future. Because what I do know is that the solutions, the answers to all our world problems are there, and they can be solved collaboratively. But the moment that we think that I've got all the answers, follow me, this is the way to go, we're missing an enormous opportunity. So to our present political leaders, let's change the language, let's change the narrative. Let's talk we. We can do this together. And we've seen that through COVID. And I think one of the things that will come out of this is the success of the National Cabinet. What's possible when health ministers, when state premiers, when the Prime Minister work more collaboratively together? What's possible when the World Health Organization can harness the collective talents of the world to solve what is an incredibly complex and challenging environment? I hope that answers your question, Elizabeth. Thank you for it. So I think it's inherent on me to say thank you very much for your time. Oh, I do have another one coming up. Thank you. And the question is, do you think post-COVID, some leaders may revert back to old style, I, versus more than ever, we need the we? And particularly in relation to the work from home model. And thank you, Paul, for your question, because I do think it was a critical one that came that I didn't refer to earlier, is this notion that what working from home has done, we've had to enable in our employees this sense of great trust. We trust you to get your work done. We're not going to be over the top of you anymore. This working from home flexible delivery can actually work for us. So I actually hope, Paul, that this sense of leaders embracing what flexible work has meant, and that the working home from model can work, not in all circumstances, but it can work. And it means that we trust in those that we work with. So I think that's a really important part of this whole narrative, that the working from home has shifted from I to we, because we collectively have got things done even without the supervision that perhaps we might have been used to. So again, thank you very much for your participation today. I know Commerce will be in touch with you. I've been delighted to be online today. At some point in time in the future, I hope we might be able to spend more time face to face again and have some of that interaction that we all crave. But in the meantime, it is important that we stay safe. It is important that we follow the rules, the regulations, and we look after each other and we call out those inappropriate behaviours. But thank you for your time today. all the best, and I look forward to coming across you at some stage. Bye for now.